But I think for art career-wise, you need to prepare. You need to prepare that and seeing your progress and asking yourself, do I still want to do this for another 10 years or 20 years or in my life? You need to have that passion, to support you as well. It's not only the money thing. You need a passion, and then you need to work on yourself, be patient, and get into the shows from the lower level to higher level.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors the bold brush. My name is Laura Arango-Bear, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips, specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. On today's episode, we sat down with Shuang Li, a classically trained Chinese-born artist who captures the world around her in an impressionistic approach. Shuang tells us about her transition to a full-time art career after working in graphic design and IT. She discusses the importance of patience, persistence, and passion when pursuing a career in the arts, and reminds us that slow and steady will bring you success. She also shares with us how her background in design has influenced her painting approach, particularly in understanding value patterns and composition. Shuang emphasizes the value of starting with local arts organizations and gradually building a reputation before applying to prestigious national shows. She also highlights the role of marketing tools like newsletters and her website in connecting with collectors and students. Finally, Shuang tells us about the local painting exhibition she's preparing with her fellow local watercolorists. Welcome, Shuang, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
Good. It's finally a calm day, hopefully, here in Southern California. So wonderful.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, and it's been so crazy over there with the fires, so I can imagine, it's been quite a complicated month in the new year. Yes. But yeah, I'm so excited to have you because your work is absolutely gorgeous. I love your color work. I love the expressiveness of how you describe the scenes that you paint. I think they're so pleasing to look at. And I think obviously our listeners, I encourage them to go to your website. It's going to be in the show notes to go look at your work while we're talking, or if they're watching the video, they can see some of your images as well. But yes, your work is so beautiful. And I also love that you use both watercolor and water-based oil paints, because it's probably a lot easier to travel with them, first of all, and second of all, I think it still creates that quality that I can see in your work of expressive strokes, without being a difficult medium to carry around, especially with the oil paints, because the oil paints can be very complicated to travel with. So yeah. So before we dive into your work a little bit more, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Shuang Li. I originally I was born and educated in China, and I came to the United States in the 1980s. And you can tell, how old I am. I got my painting training, I would say the fine arts training when I was in high school, from a professional relative. So I always loved or wanted to be a fine art artist, just paint. And since I was 16, I kept painting, and then I got into fine art college. So my 4 years of college was, though majored in graphic design, but I also did a lot of painting. We have a lot of painting as a foundation courses. So that gave me a solid basic skills. Later, before I came to United States, I also taught for 6 years at the university level. And then I decided I needed something more. So I didn't know what it was that more, but I came over anyway. And I got my second master degree in the fine art from University of Oregon. And I started working as graphic designer and later in the IT industry as a designer for more than 20 years. During that 20 years, I never stopped painting. And so that pretty much, was my pre-pro life. Painting has been and was since I was little, always my biggest passion, and I couldn't give up. So that was my previous life. Started 2011, I decided it's enough for me for the full-time job. I quit, and my husband gave me full support. So I started, as a full-time artist until today. So that's pretty much a short version of my life.
No, that's awesome. And it's good to know that you've always been in the art world. I know that some guests that I've had, they might have had a completely different career, or, they were encouraged to pursue something more practical, quote unquote, instead of the arts in any way. So it's good to know that you were always going for the arts no matter what, even if it's graphic design or IT related, because of course those are fields that are a little bit more secure when it comes to the arts compared to fine art on its own.
Yeah, you have to pay the bills, right? Everybody.
Exactly, exactly. And when you're an artist, it takes a while to build up to a point where you can, live just from your work. It's very, very rare that anyone can immediately make a living from painting only. So it's very rational to have, pursued those careers. Do you find that your background in graphic design has helped you with your artwork in any way, like maybe composition or color?
It's actually, I didn't realize until much later when I start serious like painting as a full time. I realized that, especially when I was teaching, I constantly used the word design, and then I used the word design elements. So definitely my graphic design background, the early training helped me to not only understand that, but also put into a practice, especially, when I was teaching, I can point out why you need to paint this way, why you shouldn't be doing that way. So the design, definitely design and fine art, many, many times we use the same concept, same principles.
I agree. Yeah. And I think if anything, from my perspective, I think careers that are design focused are a little bit more ahead in the compositional aspect, because I think in the fine art world, oftentimes we're just told it's until it looks good, right? You just move stuff around until it looks good. But with, if you already know design, you already know what's supposed to look good. You already have like these general sort of rules that you can follow that are
Yes.
taught to you right away, basically. So that, that's a really good carryover. So I think there's that advantage that design careers have a little bit over just fine art.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I wanted to ask you also, because you paint really beautiful plein air landscapes, but as I said earlier, watercolor and oil. When you are deciding your subject matter, what do you look for when you're looking for something that you want to paint?
Okay, so that's a great question. The plein air, also in the studio, it's the same if you use other reference materials. So when I go outside, the world is in front of you so big. So what I was actually looking for is not the actual things, let's say trees and a house or a river or the rocks. What I really looking for is, can this one make a good design? See, I already start mentioning the word design. Can this scene make it into a good design into my painting? And the first thing I would look usually is what I call it is a value pattern. What does that mean? Is I would look like my main subject matter over there in the distance or close by. Is this light against the dark, or the dark against light. Okay. So for instance, if it's a white ocean wave against the dark rock, so I have to decide it. I'm going to make the white wave as my main focus or as the rock as my focus. You have to pick. You cannot say, oh, I'll have a half. Yeah, they are together, but you really have to say what this moment touches me and I want to paint. So if I use the rock, definitely I'm using the whole rock as a darker element against the lighter sky. Then in front of the rock, then I'll have the white wave. So that white wave, you have to remember, you cannot make it a half. You have to make it as a prominent, but you have to remember you're painting the rock as your main dark elements against the background. So that's usually how I pick. But if you say, oh, today I'm just going to want the ocean wave, and then you have to make the ocean wave against something that's darker than the white wave. So that will help me instantly design and thinking my painting as from the value perspective instead of thinking about the things, the wave splash or, there's a bird over the rock, etc. So I'll temporarily forget about those details, but focusing on the value pattern and how dark, how light my composition needs to be.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable way to approach it because, like you said, it's so easy to get a little lost in how nice everything is.
Yeah.
And you lose that focus. And obviously, if you want to make a really powerful painting that draws the viewer, you need to have a place where you want the viewer to look, right? If everything is, equally treated and equally in focus, then the viewer is just going to look around and it's going to be a little bit confusing for them to know where to look. So I think it's very wise.
Yeah, well, what I usually say is don't be too hungry. You go outside and you want to put everything in there. Yeah, everything is beautiful, but don't be too hungry. You can paint not only one, but 10 or 100 paintings at the same spot, but you have a different composition. So pick what's important this time to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, very smart. And I wonder if that's also something that, obviously comes from like the design aspect of like graphic design, because oftentimes in graphic design there is, a focused sort of element that you want to highlight, and then everything else kind of like has to, either point to that element or be at a lower hierarchy, right? There's like a bit of a hierarchy there. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That is fascinating how it works out, the crossover between, the arts in that way.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, so in the end, I think after so many years, you just realize, oh, now I see everything is connected. Just like you're painting, you need everything to be well connected. The art world, the knowledge, after certain years of trying, you will see the knowledge actually is connected everywhere. Yeah, from different fields, they all come to help.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other thing that I find interesting, because a lot of the concepts that you mentioned, I've seen them in the Andrew Loomis book, where he talks about all the design elements and composition. I forget the name of the book right now, but he also mentions, those value schemes. And what I think is interesting also is when someone just comes from a fine art background where they just learn technique, we're not really taught the value scheme idea very much, at least in my experience. But it's something that when you do know it the way that you might, it becomes a very implicit thing that you learn in the design world very naturally, and then you don't realize that you know that. It's one of those things where it so well, it almost becomes intuition. Whereas with, some fine art background people, it might be a little bit more, like I said earlier, elusive. Like it's almost like, oh, it's until it looks good, or oh, you gotta just play around with it. Where, if you already know how value schemes work and how to bring focuses and the highlights and everything, then it's a lot easier to just focus and make a piece instead of fumbling a little bit, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I actually think I didn't know what or how powerful the value pattern or the value scale should be in the painting for quite a long time. So I always wondered why my painting doesn't really look right or look good.
Yeah.
I also blame, my color wasn't right or the detail. I didn't really know how to paint this little thing, etc. But later, when I found this, it was like, this is the hugest aha moment. You would say, oh, that's because my value is wrong. Sometimes the process, the word saying, the value does all the work, but the color gets all the credit. We all know that, right?
Yes.
But how I actually found out and helped myself to improve on the awareness of values is you could simply turn your painting into black and white. Then instantly you will know, and you compare to the pros or the paintings you admire, you do the same thing, take a photo of that painting, compare these two black and white, instantly you will know, oh, that's why the other painting is so good or so powerful, it's because the value is correct. Even like the piece as an impressionism piece, like colors everywhere, you couldn't really realize it. But when you turn it into the black and white, you will see it.
No, yes. Yes, absolutely. And it's really, I think it's very natural for us to be so in love with color and to want to emphasize color, but yeah, 100% value is always going to be higher in the hierarchy than color. Like color
Yeah.
you can play with after, but yeah, those value scales and making sure that things like if something isn't looking like it's popping out enough, it's probably because it's the same value as the things around it and it's just getting lost in there. So there's that really subtle power that, like you said, value needs to have this subtle power that color kind of like distracts us from, like color's like, oh yeah, that's pink, so I'm gonna make it extra pink, or that's yellow, I'm gonna make it extra yellow. But before you know it, you have this mess. Things usually aren't as chromatic as we think they are.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. And then I wanted to ask you, because you've taught for a long time, and I wanted to know, what is something that you would recommend for someone who really wants to improve at the craft of painting?
So this is a very good question. So I think it will be two things. One is you need to understand what's behind it. That's why you take workshops and such. You need to understand what's behind us to make a good painting, like what we said, the design, the composition, the design principles, and how you use these knowledge. How you use this knowledge is the key. It's jumping from you read a book, you say, I understand what the author says, but can you practice on your painting? So first you need to understand in theory a lot of things, read the books and such. Then when you move to the practice part, of course, you will remind yourself when you're doing the painting, don't go back to your old way. You need to work on your knowledge into your painting. At that time, usually you try that and you will create a lot of disasters. So that's the period. You're struggling, you try to apply new knowledge. I always say when people come to my workshop, I said, okay, so here's the workshop we're going to start, but you have to lower your expectations. I expect everybody paint your worst piece, not the best piece in my workshop. Why? Because you need to learn new things. So that's the part I think people always thought, gee, they came to a class or workshop, they would have a masterpiece painted as the teacher, the instructor, which is actually, I would say it's totally opposite. So be patient is the second part. practice and be patient. I gave a phrase to my serious student. I said, if you think anything is good in my painting, any brush stroke, any composition, any color looks good, I failed at least 999 times. So prepare that. And you keep practicing using the knowledge you just gained and keep practicing. So this will create a positive circle and move you forward.
Yes, that's very true. I think a lot of us, especially today with, social media and with the internet, there's this feeling that everything has to be fast, right? So very few of us have, been able to build the patience to take it slow and make sure that things are steady, because everyone, and I've met a lot of people who just really, really want the end results without necessarily going through all of the work for it. I think that's, I think it's also human nature. We really want things now, but it takes time. And I think, in my opinion, when it does take time, I think it's much more rewarding when you do get to that perfect brush stroke or that beautiful composition or that really nice painting, because you can feel that you worked well for it, not necessarily worked hard, but worked a lot, and we're patient, like you said. I totally agree. And I think it also applies very much to the career of an artist, right? It takes time. It's good to be patient in that way as well. So, which actually I was going to ask you too, what was it like for you when you made that jump into becoming a full-time artist?
Well, I actually, well, on one side, it's kind of scary, right? From a practical side, you all of a sudden you don't have that paycheck comes in every 2 weeks, so you have to say, oh my God, I'm going to make a living. So you have to prepare that. But once you overcome that fear, I think I had a lot of joy, because even before I become full-time artist, I always try to paint in the evenings and during the weekend. It, I never had enough time to do whatever I want to do. Now I realize that from Monday till Sunday, every single day is my painting day. So that's the huge joy for me. And I went crazy. My husband said, "Why you're not drinking or eating?" It's like I have no time. I just need to paint, paint, paint. It's so joyful. So to me, it's my dream come to the reality and become what I really want to be since I was 16. So that was really lovely. Um, but when you get into the professional world gradually, you realize that it's not just a painting. I kept explaining to my other friends who are not artists, and they say, "Oh, you stand there, you paint, and looks so relaxing." It's like, it's not. We have that deadlines, we have a paperwork, we have the accounting part, we have tax to pay, all these things that's related to the single person who try to be full-time artist as a business. So there are other side of this. You always wanted to also take it seriously, not like just painting. Because if you just paint, you cannot become a full-time artist. You have to do the other side of like not so fun work to make this part as a successful career. So that would I think that I realize people saying you need to spend almost 40% of the time, to do the other work. Sometimes I think I could squeeze to like 30%, but still you needed to do the other part if you really wanted to be a full-time and a serious artist.
Yes, exactly. And that actually ties in perfectly with my next question, which is, what are some of the tools that you personally use, that are marketing tools that have helped you sell your work and get students and, get more, basically do that 40% of the other part of the business of art.
Oh yeah, I just love FASO. I have to say, before, I think it's before 2011, I used different website, which it was pretty much because I thought, gee, I came from IT world. I can do this. So I just used the other website. I realized that, it didn't have half of the things I needed. Every pieces I needed to go spend time to, search and, redo it. I hate it. So once I switched to FASO, the website, the newsletter, social media connections, and also the e-commerce, all these tools is right there as one. So that's perfect for artists who wanted to take your artwork, artwork into the business world. So, and I think the most is one is a website and the two is a newsletter. And newsletter helped me tremendously, I would say. Um, I'm not very good at going outside and, horn myself, says, hey, come to see my painting. I'm not that type of person. And I'm too busy. I teach workshops and demos and, travel many things. So newsletter gave me the great opportunity to reach to people who I don't have in my workshop, and they can not only see, but keep a connection and see all my events coming up. So I use newsletter a lot. And for people who don't really utilize this tool, you probably don't know. FASO provided the back end for the pro artist to look at your data as a newsletter when it sends out. You can see how many people opened. Of course, there are people, unsubscribe, but it's very few. Like in my cases, it's very few. And how many people opened it and where they clicked. All these data helped me to understand what I should be putting into the newsletter and to keep my audience. And, of course, and sometimes I do my marketing. Let's say um, 2 years ago, I had a new book come out. Of course, I did the marketing everywhere, but mainly those, my subscribers are my main marketing target. So I just sent out the links to them, and the response was like enormous. So that was, I think that, people just didn't realize, people say, oh, I hate writing. Yeah, I hate writing too. English is even not my native language. But you don't need to write a lot. You only need to write something that's interesting and it connects to your author. And usually I show people what I did the past months and what the show was in the future. And that's it. The short and sweet newsletter helped me to have a lot of responses.
Yes. Yeah. I think for sure newsletter is the unsung hero for a lot of artists who, I've met so many artists and very few of them actually mention newsletters. They'll maybe mention social media, but I think newsletters for sure are a much more steady way of, first of all, connecting with people who really love your work because they took that extra step, right, to sign up for your newsletter, which means they already love your work, they already care, and they want to be there.
Yeah.
So I think for sure building that newsletter list is really important. Of course, you can start it with social media or with exhibitions with shows, but yeah, I totally agree. And it doesn't have to be long. I love that you mentioned that. I think it can be intimidating for people to think that they have to write an essay like they did at school, instead of, it could just be a short paragraph. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. So that really makes it a little bit more manageable for people who maybe are a little more shy about writing or don't like writing. And of course, that's part of that, like we said, the 40% of the little things that really help with marketing. And I agree, having a professional website where people can see your work and it's all in there, where you can also sell your work, that's also really important. And I agree, FASO definitely helps with that because in my experience, it's probably the fastest website you could put together compared to
Yes.
other websites because they already have everything. Um, so yeah, I totally agree. And then in terms of, painting societies or joining shows and stuff, do you think that, even if you're early in your career as an artist, is it worth it for them to also apply for shows and all of these painting societies?
Uh, I would say yes and no. It depends. Okay, so my suggestion is from my own experience, and I also at the time I got a lot of advice from the pros that's ahead of me. Well, I think I would recommend people who you just if you just get started, start from local, and that's your roots. Okay, I live in San Diego County, so the first organization when I moved here in 2003, so I joined the local watercolor society in 2004, and till today. So that's your base, and because those kind of society usually provide uh, member shows that's a little bit lower level, so it's easy to get in, and you can gain the confidence from there. And if you wanted to teach, or if you wanted to be a serious, full time or half time, but you wanted to be serious, then you can first get the signature member level from those local art organizations. And some people got too ambitious and they start applying the national one. You have to understand that the national level of art organizations open to the world. The United States, I paint a lot of watercolors. So the watercolor, the National Watercolor Society, American Watercolor Society is one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast. They both open to the entire world. So you are competing with the best artists from everywhere in the globe. So in that case, you have to ask yourself, am I at that level, or I'm just throwing my money away, just, try to be part of that. So I would say start local and you will gain the confidence and you will meet other artists and you will make connections and then you will improve as well. Then at some point when you feel you're improving your work a lot, then of course connected with the national masters, that's a great way to go. So you can like oil painters. There's oil painters of America. And there's Impressionism Society, and they are also named local, but more national, like California Art Club I belong to. These are much higher, and a lot of times they need a pre-qualification. Let's say the California Art Club. If you want to apply the artist membership, I remember I prepared like 7 pages long writing stuff and a lot of artwork, and then they review, then you can get in. So one step at a time, and I think that not only much more practical, but also help you to gain the confidence in the art world.
At BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by FASO. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e-commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day by day, step by step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So, if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's FASO.com/podcast. Definitely. And that ties into also what you mentioned earlier about having that patience, about, both in your craft and then also in the, building the career aspect, which it does take long. I mean, when I was in art school, one of my instructors said it'll take about 10 years for that career to really start showing. And at the time I was like, ah, but now I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I think it would even take longer for some people because it takes the time that it takes. And
Yeah.
there's no way to skip steps. Like you said, you can't just apply for the big shot if you haven't really built up your work, if you haven't built up your voice. I think it can be very tempting to want to shoot for the stars, and there's no problem with that, but there's also, if you're not ready for maybe the disappointment of the rejection, because we face a lot of rejection as artists, especially from galleries, from shows, from a lot of things, it might be very painful to get rejected. um
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Would you say that, with the painting societies and organizations that you've worked with, have you found that you also have found collectors that way, or have you maybe worked with galleries? Like, what have been some of the ways that you've been able to get some collectors for your work?
So the collectors, I think they came from multiple sources. Um, there are a lot of collectors were my students. So I have to say that. So they attend my workshop, and then they saw my demo pieces, and then they wanted to collect one or two. So they, when they go home, not only they can hang on the wall, they can remember what they learned from the workshop. So that's a part one. The student collectors, they usually love art. That's why they come to workshop and such. The other collectors, I think, is from galleries. Uh, People still visit galleries, believe it or not. Even the social media is, out there. People still visit galleries. So when I have a paintings in the show, a lot of those pieces got sold, through the show at the gallery. Different locations, from New York to California to Seattle to who knows where. Um, so that's another reason you wanted to get into the show, is sometimes you will find that the collectors come and they will later come after you. They will, when they bought your painting, they look at, I usually always put a business card in the back of my painting. Then they would come back to the website, and then they will sign up for the newsletter, and then they will become your, almost like a permanent collector in the future. So that's how, a collector circle can start that way. The other ones would be more other, like a higher level event. There are serious collectors, and they go to, let's say, the plein air competitions or some art festivals, and they knew whom they wanted to collect. Those are more sophisticated collectors. Those are like, the higher level. And then once you work your career gradually progress, and you will meet those collectors. But they are very selective. So you have to be really good, and they will follow you as well. So I would say that's pretty much, my main sources. Yeah, I do sell certain things through social media, but I don't trust social media that much. A lot of fake ones on Facebook, and don't just say, anybody say they wanted to buy a piece from you. Don't trust them too much. If it's a serious collector, they know how to find you. They know they will go through the proper route to connect you and to get the piece.
Yeah, that's the biggest risk is the scams online.
Yeah,
But yeah,
too
I think
many.
it's great. Yeah, way too many scam. Yeah, it's really it can be frustrating because, I think it's scary when you're an early stage artist where it's early in your career and you get one of those messages and maybe you fall for it. I think that's really bad. But yeah, going through the proper channels, right? If someone really wants to collect your work, they will go to your website, right? Or they'll contact the gallery and they'll, find a way to get your work in a legitimate way. Because I think a serious collector would also be afraid of getting scammed back, like they would be afraid of like, oh, I want to buy this piece, but is this person real? Is the work real?
Right,
So
right,
they would also be worried about that. Yeah.
exactly.
Um, yes. And then I'm actually really curious to know, before you made the jump into becoming a full-time artist, were you already working with galleries, or did you start working with them after you made the jump?
I think it's after.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, here is the thing. Any galleries, if you go through certain society to go to the national shows and etc., you have to be at the society's bar at least. Then you can
Mm.
go into certain galleries. Then afterwards, the galleries are very selective. The galleries usually they would say they wanted to see you are consistent, you have a body of work at the same level most of the time. Yeah, sometimes we all paint bad paintings, but the galleries wanted to see you are consistent. So they don't want to see your piece. Okay, this month you gave them a one piece and looks fantastic, and next month and then you pull in three pieces and none of those are good. So they don't want that. And they don't know how to promote you for that. Also, these days, the galleries hardly promote any one single artist. So you are competing with the other artists on the same wall. The gallery owners want all the pieces in his or her gallery looks at the same level. That's why, some people say, oh, it's hard to get in and they don't want me. Yeah, because they have so many artists to select and they wanted a certain professional look in their gallery. They don't want people to think that they're, very expensive locations are selling like a garage sale pieces. So they wanted to keep their reputation as well. And then that's how I understand that, they select your piece. So I actually didn't get into certain galleries until quite late, you know. And that's another thing you wanted to be patient with, with yourself. If you keep going into the national level shows, that means that you are probably ready. But before that, the locals sometimes they sell, the small pieces for the tourists and such. Yeah, that's workable. But uh, the key for me, at least, is keep working at yourself and make yourself, to the certain bar. And then it's a time, and you can consider to select get, you know, any galleries that's nearby or at your preference at the certain locations.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's good to, like you said, remember that when you're looking at a gallery, it's good to look at the artists they already have to see the level of the work, like you mentioned.
Yeah,
Because of course, the gallery is trying to sell, right? That's how they
exactly.
live, that's how they survive,
Yeah,
which is why they have an expectation of an artist's work. Um, that the comparison was so funny that you mentioned garage sale artwork. It's very true. You can't really, I mean, there might be a gallery out there who likes that type of work, but maybe not in the fine art, like plein
Right.
air, landscape, studio work
Yeah.
type of world. I'm sure there's someone out there, but definitely not, some of the galleries that we pursue as realist fine art painters. But yeah, so that makes me also curious. Before you made the jump, I'm assuming you were painting on the side, right? You were painting some of your uh personal work maybe, or did you oh, and also were you also trying to join exhibitions, or were you just work and hobby painting? And then like how was that like for you? Were you still painting before you became a fine artist? Like full time?
Yeah, so before full time, so that's the transition I think the people need kind of to understand. You cannot just say, okay, I quit my day job, and then next day I become full-time artist. I actually prepared that for more than 10 years, believe it or not. So that means in the 90s, I already was painting, take workshops, and following on all these societies, but I didn't really join. I joined some, at the time I was in the Northern California, I joined some locals. I entered some pieces at the local member shows. That's why in the very beginning I mentioned that if you wanted to be serious, join your local societies first. Most of our local art societies, they are member based, so they usually will have more than one show per year. When you come to the national ones, we sometimes we call them the show only societies. So they only do 1 or 2 shows per year. That's it. And then and it's hard to reach. How can you reach someone in New York if you're in California? So it's difficult. So I actually when I moved to California at that time, I mainly I was focusing on painting the watercolors. So I joined the multiple local watercolor societies. Even I was working every month, I would be sending my piece because it's local. You can drive there and you know their schedule. And then I just drop off my painting to get into the member shows. So those helped greatly. So before I even quit my day job, I was already teaching. So they already invited me to teach. I forgot whether I got a signature member beforehand, probably. Yeah. So that was because I kept painting, kept entering, and I kept getting awards from the member show. Then I realized, hey, maybe it's a good time I can apply, signature member. And then they require the international level show for 3 times, and you can, get the signature member. And then I start teaching. Then then after that, for a couple of years, then I finally quit my job. I felt I was ready. So you have to, well, you don't really have to, but if you're financially able, you can just say quit, right? But I think for art career wise, you need to prepare. You need to prepare that and seeing your progress and asking yourself, do I still want to do this for another 10 years or 20 years or in my life? You need to have that passion, to support you as well. It's not only the money thing, because a lot of uh, I saw some students, they start when they retire, whatever, they had this huge urge to learn and paint. So they were very, working very hard. And then pretty soon, they kind of like lost their passion. Oh, it's so difficult. I'm not making enough progress. And then they kind of stopped. So in that case, you just cannot jump into the pro world because you don't have enough passion to go through, to help you to go through the difficult, growth period. So that would be my opinion. I would say you need a passion, yeah, and then you need to work on yourself, be patient, and yeah, get into the shows from the lower level to higher level.
Yes, yes. And again, it's the most practical, steady approach. Because from what you described, it seemed like it wasn't very difficult for you to, you know, having already built, right, this local community with your work and having done this, it's a little less scary to quit that day job and continue with the work because you have this continuous stream next
Yeah,
to another one and then you just jump into it, right?
yeah,
Versus just jumping out and then not knowing where you're gonna land.
right.
So I think that that's a very wise way of doing it. I know I've also heard of some artists who try to go for galleries while they're, working their day job, and I think that might be a bit challenging as well. I think the way that you decided to go about it was probably the most effective at that keeping that steady pace and consistency. Like you said, I think it's so
Yes,
important too to be
yes,
consistent.
yes.
And yeah, sometimes having a day job can make that difficult because of the time management aspect. So that's, yeah, it's very wise. And then do you have any final piece of advice for someone who wants to become a full-time artist?
Um, I think it's like any career. You know, the artist job or the artist as a career these days is at a kind of a crossroad, I would say. If you want to jump into it, uh, there are some aspect that we need to understand. When I started, because I was already in IT industry, so when I started, the social media is there, but it's not that hot. Okay, uh, and the social media now, 20 years into, uh, almost changed everybody's life and changed the way we show our artwork to the world. Okay, so when if you wanted to jump into the pro world, you wanted to consider that. The other not very pleasant side of the fine art is you have to understand that this is not a necessity in people's life. That's why people say they wanted to buy a diamond ring put on their finger, but they don't want to spend a couple of $100 buying a painting because this is not a necessity and it's hard to show off. They can show off and say, I have a diamond ring, but you cannot show off and say, I have a piece of a painting, unless you have, like a Picasso or something. So when you jump into the pro world, you have to understand that now these days AI is showing, and AI can paint whatever people want it. No, I never liked any, at least so far. So all these changes make the art as expensive and very selective. So when you decided the transition, I would say the money will come, but don't put your money request as the first thing on your list. Just ask yourself, do I love this? How much love I can put in? Okay, and with this much love, how much effort I wanted to put in? What if I don't make a penny? And if you can answer all these questions, there's no right or wrong answers. But if you can answer all these questions with your own answer and you're determined, then go for it and keep working on yourself. And persistent will always pay off in the end.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That is so true. And it is a very challenging career path, right? As
Yes.
you might know, it is something that will test you again and again and again in usually the same way. I've heard artists tell me that it's basically how like they have gone through their entire career, they have faced the exact same issue over and over, but obviously they have more strength to face it because they still have that passion for their work. Like the doubts that they may have about their work never really goes away. they just get better at managing the doubt and overcoming it, but it never, like, it's always there. So it is very important, like you said, to really question yourself about what it would mean for you for the rest of your life
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
pursue such a challenging path. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. Well, do you have any upcoming shows or exhibitions or anything that's coming up that you would like to promote?
Uh, for this year, I decided that because I'm adding the oil, the water mixable oil into my studio shelf, so
Mhm.
I decided this year is going to be my pretty much off year to work on more different pieces. But I do have a group show that's coming up in May. It's what is it called? It's the five artists are both all local, and we paint local scenes, and we put a group show just called a nearby home or something like that. You know, it's just everything is surrounded us. We wanted the locals to see the beauty of what the local artists can present. So that's also related to the topic we talk about is, you wanted to connect with local, that it's a great way to do it. I'm working on a book, but the book seems like it's still so far away. This is the book I got a lot of this is sort of a new book. Then I got a lot of requests. I have to put into the comments into Facebook a lot. Is many oil painters, especially like the age like around retirement time, and they say, I want to travel, I also wanted to paint, but it's hard to carry the oils and then everything, and it's so heavy. So then I said switch to watercolor, and then they say I don't know how to paint watercolors in the outdoors. So 2 years ago I put together, this is a very detailed book. It's on my website too. So you can have go to my website and you can see the link there, and then it covers every single thing. Then you can just have one bag and in your luggage, and you don't even need to carry the tube of paint if you travel for 1 week or 10 days. So everything is here. What do you need from the equipment? The most basics to the most advanced. So I would say I still recommend. The reason I have this book is because there was no such book telling people how you can do it. So this would be one that I would love to get help more artists to do this. Use watercolor. You can do it. Or watercolor and the oils are in 90% of the time they are the same. There are 10% the difference that you can work up.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I think if I was going to attempt plein watercolor, and I like I was mentioning way earlier that it's so much easier to carry it around than
Yeah.
oils, like you said. And then if you're traveling, like you need to buy the turpentine, or you need to buy, the mineral spirits or linseed oil, and it's all very not just heavy stuff, but also kind of dangerous stuff to be carrying around because it's flammable and all of these
Yeah.
things. It is nice to know that with watercolor, there's a bit more of an ease of mobility, especially if
Yeah.
you can fit it all in a tiny little box, which I've seen people do,
Yeah.
which is so cool.
Yeah, you can use a tiny box, or you can use like a regular palette like I use, and then you can everything you can just pack in your luggage, and you'll be ready to go. So when I travel, this is how I do it. My regular palette, and I will show you in a second. So I actually pack everything in there. Of course, in my book, I described everything already, right? So you can check on details. This is my regular palette. Okay. And I squeeze in all my paints, sturdy now, squeezing all my paints and let it dry a little bit, and I put in the plastic bag. it's not going to run. People say, oh, my color is going to come out and to my clothes. No, it's not going. If you let it dry a little bit, use a hair dryer or just like naturally dry a little bit. That's all you need to carry. I use this palette, the full well of paints to paint for 7 to 10 days.
Wow.
Yeah, for every day I'll paint 2 to 6 pieces. That's how easy it is. And then I don't carry my oils with me. I'm too old to carry the whole bag and with all the tubes and just too much. So that's it, and I would highly recommend watercolor. People say watercolor is difficult. Yeah, if you paint well in watercolor, you go back to oil, your oil will be a lot easier. I promise you.
It might be worth trying watercolor then.
Yeah. But remember, lower the expectations when you start learning something. That's what I said.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you'll get there. Yeah.
Yeah. Get that passion to keep going, to push through all of the doubt and the pain.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, thank you so much, Shuang. Do you mind telling us where people can find more of your work?
Yeah. Well, a lot of works are in the national level shows. It depends on, if I try hard enough to get in, right? Yeah, but I usually go to different shows, about 10 national or international level shows per year. Okay. And that's the probably major source to find me. Of course, on my website, I'll keep posting new work, social media sometimes. And I'm a signature member of Laguna Plein Association. And almost every month you will find some of my work over there. And it's a great organization, and I had a lot of fun with them. And of course, if you come to California, visit our local watercolor societies. I'll have work over there too. Yeah. Right now, I don't have any galleries. That's the other part I didn't talk about, is the galleries these days go off of business quickly. Yeah, a lot of galleries have a hard time because artists have the source to go to sell our own work through FASO and other places. So if you have hard time finding the galleries, use FASO to sell your work. Yeah, so that will, and to display, to sell your work at one place and under your own control. That's also great.
Yes, absolutely. Well, awesome. And I'm guessing people can also sign up for your newsletter. Since you did mention you're working on another book, hopefully you will have that sometime within the next couple years, so we can see your amazing book. Because just from looking at the first one, I'm already like, oh, I know what resource I would totally get if and when I start watercolor.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for having me, and it's a really fun chat with you.
Yes, thank you.